Good afternoon, everyone, and a happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Check Me Out. And today we're going to go to talk about the start of the day, even though it's the afternoon, and talk about this amazing breakfast product that one of my wonderful clients, Dane Fuller, has made. And that is Fuller Overnight Oats. Now, Dane, this is not your first foray into products. You've also done some other brands and to do with Amazon, and I think the key learnings on Amazon are going to be really valuable today, so we'll have a chat about that. But first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your background and a little bit about Fuller?
Yes, sure, Laura. Thanks very much for having me, and thank you for all your support that you've given me as well. And so like Laura said, I have had other brands before. This is the first time I've actually engaged a professional like Laura. So previous to this, my other brands, they're my own brands, my own products. I've created them and I've sold them into Amazon in the US. And I have done the branding through, I guess, the cheaper methods as possible. And I was recommended to use Laura by a friend of mine here on Waikiki Island where I live. She's a food producer as well. And I was reluctant to, but it's been the best decision that I've made for this entire brand. And I can justify that by saying that every time somebody sees my product and the brand, they don't never tell me how great it tastes or anything. They always tell me how good the branding is and how great the packaging looks. And I can't take any credit for that because that was all you, Laura. So thank you very much for your support.
You're welcome.
For helping me shape the brand and for giving those first impressions, which are so important. And those first impressions are really important on a space like Amazon. When you go to shop on Amazon, the shopper sees a wall of little icons, and you need to be able to capture their eye really quickly, and all they get to see is that little icon. And they'll flick through that really quickly. And if you're not on page one, then it's going to be really difficult to capture their attention. And so that the packaging, although the customer isn't going to pull it off a shelf, they still need to see it on the screen in a small icon and click on it and then investigate further. And so you only have that one opportunity to get their attention, and that's why the packaging has been so important. And my other brands, they didn't have that. They didn't have the the real value of the branding behind that. And so my experience with using Amazon was really product centered and not brand centered. And that's been one learning experience this time around, is really focusing on the brand and not so much just on the product.
Awesome. And we spent quite a lot of time, didn't we, on your products and making sure that they were really stand out on a small space. And I think that really does show because for those that don't know, Dane's probably biggest competitor was Oats Overnight, which dominated on Amazon. And so they were using only two colors and the color that changed out each time for each flavor. So we adopted a similar approach with that, and obviously in a different way, and it really worked. So yeah, so obviously knowing that your biggest competitor is Oats Overnight, can you tell us a little bit about your product and what makes yours different from the standard Oats Overnight brand?
Well, I think the biggest difference is the serving size and the person that I'm targeting. And so all of the overnight oats products, and Oats Overnight is the biggest competitor, they have a smaller serving size. And when I tried their product and some of the other products, it just wasn't enough to keep me full. And I'm used to consuming breakfast as an athlete, and I was a rower. And so I really needed a really good filling breakfast. And, what they were offering was good, but it just wasn't enough. I needed at least double that. So I was a nutritionist previously, getting involved in e-commerce, and all the clients that I worked with, I would always advise them to have a really big, nice filling breakfast. It was always oat-based. So I wanted this breakfast to do the same thing for them, but without the time and hassle it takes to prepare, to consume, and to clean up something like that. And so I just made everything available in one packet. So it's got the fruit, the oats, everything else that you need for an overnight oats, but I made it in a larger serving size so that it would keep people fuller for longer. And that became one of the founding principles of my brand, which is also my surname, to keep people fuller for longer. And so it was really the combination of the types of ingredients that we've got in there, in terms of, some really nice, heavy, slow carbohydrates, a really good source of protein, got lots of fruit and the seeds and a really high fiber count, and the size of the product. So all those things work really well together to keep people fuller for longer. Whereas my other competitors, their most main point of difference is the flavors. So they've got lots and lots of weird and wonderful flavor combinations that people consume because it's really interesting. You can buy a flavor, for example, it's called peach upside down cake or birthday cake, and those types of flavors, they don't connect with me. I don't want to. It doesn't sound healthy to me, and I don't want to be having something like that for breakfast. And so a lot of the other people that are attracted to my brand are athletes as well, and they don't want a birthday cake for breakfast either. They want something that's going to keep them full and energized and focused, and give them all the energy they need for their training session. So that's where my point of difference is.
And you talk a little bit about your target market being athletes and the larger serving size, and that. How did you go about really working out, like nailing down who your target market was? Were these the kind of clients that you were working with previously for nutrition?
No. I narrowed my target market down to be men that were busy, that were fathers, and that wanted to lose some weight. That was my initial target market, and it still may be. But at this stage, I can see the athlete market really taking off, and triathletes in particular seem to be really attracted to the brand, and they're attracted to it because of the ease of consumption. So this product can also be made up as a shake, and so it can come with a bottle. You buy a large bottle and you tip it in the bottle, mix it up, put it in the fridge, and then you can just drink it. And so that really appeals to athletes, particularly triathletes, because they train so much. They invest a lot of time in training and also a lot of money in terms of the events that they go to and also the equipment that they need. And so they're also willing to spend that amount of money and make sure they get the right nutrition. And so they'll choose my product because it decreases their time. They can have it and their breakfast is done in 60 seconds. And so my target market has, I hope that I'll have different segments of the market that I can serve. So one of them might be people that are overweight, they want to lose weight, and they want to do that by feeling fuller for a longer period of time. So I can serve them. The athletes, I can serve them, and the commuter, I can serve them as well. But I'm really conscious that I want to penetrate the market with the minimal resources that I have, really at a narrow point. And so I'm doing that research now in terms of outreach on social media to see who's going to pick it up, see who's really interested in it. And at the moment, it seems to be these triathletes are picking it up. And if that's the case, then I'll focus in on that athletic market. And the other weight loss market, I'll probably test. But that can come after. I just need to penetrate the market, first of all, with a tribe, just finding my tribe.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's like niching down to a point where it's not necessarily that those are the only people you'll target, because you will pick up people along the way. And it's interesting that you say, originally we had a lot of talk about it's kind of speaking to men and making sure that we spoke in a way that was, that attracted sort of males, because as predominantly they're not the shoppers. It's often usually the women or we're not being sexist in any way here, but it's usually the women who are the main household shoppers and stuff like that. But the one thing I wanted to talk about is about your social media, and I know that you've been very open and forthcoming with your journey with this. Why is that really important to you to share the journey for Fuller on social media?
Well, from a business perspective, it helps to get followers, because people are interested in someone who's taking a risk, no matter what it is. If they're taking a risk, then they might see a train crash, and when people drive past a car crash, they're rubbernecking, they're turning to look. When they watch reality TV, they are looking for drama and for upsets. And so when someone like myself puts themselves out there to say that they want to create something or achieve something, people will be drawn to watch that because I might fail. I might succeed, but I also might fail. And so they get to come along on that journey. And when they join me on that journey, they also become invested in the brand. They can see where I've come from, and that really brings them in as a founding member, if you like, that they have seen something from its origins to get to a supermarket shelf, and they have some ownership over that. And I can give them more ownership over that by asking for their opinion. Like, when you first did these, Laura, you came up with some mock samples for me that we could put up on my social media pages and get feedback from people and get advice on colours and what they liked and what they didn't like. And so doing all of that just helps to make the brand more about me, because it's not about me. I'm trying to serve a market to give those people what they need. And if I can ask them what they need, it makes my job a lot easier, but it also means that they're more invested in the journey and they can see where it's come from. Because most people don't understand what it takes to create a product, right? That they sit in the supermarket shop, but they don't know where that's come from. And they probably have some perception in their mind that these things are easy and you just go along and you make a few choices and you think you have this opportunity and you create something and then it's on the supermarket shelf. But it goes through so many iterations before it gets to that stage, and so many decisions need to be made. And so for them to get a window into that process, starting from the brand name to the logo to the colours on the package, all those things become important and I think interesting for people to follow and learn along the way.
I agree. I think that's really important. It also really creates trust in the brand because they've seen who is behind the brand and the battler. Everyone loves a battler kind of a thing. And so I think that creating that trust and some of the advice I think that I do tend to give to brands is having somebody out there to be a spokesperson and live the brand, be part of that target market is super crucial for creating trust in a brand, which is why we buy things to start with. So I think that's really awesome.
And there's one other thing I'll add to that, Laura. Sorry, I just remembered that one of the things is it's not just about seeing people fail or succeed, but it's also helping them as well. And I received some really helpful advice, which might be helpful for other people out there if you're thinking about getting on social media to tell your story, but you're worried about doing that and you're scared, because I was. And they said that if you've got a challenge, something that you're trying to achieve, it's like, your car is on the side of the road and it's broken down, and people can go past and see you standing there beside your car doing nothing. No one's going to stop. But if you get behind the car and you start pushing it, and they can see that you're making an effort and you've got something that you are trying to achieve, they're much more likely to stop and help you. And so your social media presence can be like that. If you explain where you're trying to get to and they can see you pushing, they can see you making mistakes, but they can see that you're making an effort, then people do and they will stop to help you. And I've had that happen so many times on social media where people will put their hands up and they will offer me advice and they will help me. And so if people out there that are listening to this video replay, if you have any doubts about that, just try. And you'll be amazed at how many people will put their hand out to help you up, to help you get up. And some of those connections that you'll make will make a massive difference to your success and to the decisions that you make.
Absolutely. That's very good advice. I totally agree with you on that. I mean, there's definitely been times in my business where I've sort of just jumped on social media and say, help, I'm overwhelmed. I've had a lot going on, and you get really good feedback. So having that community around you, no one is self-made in this world. There's no such thing. And so particularly in a product business, the more good people that you have around you, and that's definitely been a commonality with talking to other brands as well, other successful brands and big brands, and saying that, they weren't self-made, no one ever was. So that's really cool. If we dive into Amazon for a little bit, and now you mentioned that you've had your other brands and things like that. What is it like getting onto Amazon? Because I know there are a lot of Kiwi products that would do quite well in that kind of space, but it is, for New Zealanders at least, a very a sort of a bit of a black hole as to how you actually get yourself on board. So what advice would you give to people about Amazon?
Amazon is when we talk about Amazon has lots of different different outlets, if you like, or different platforms that you could sell on. So here in New Zealand, we might think about selling on Amazon.com.au. In Australia, and if you do that, incidentally, you can benefit from their shipping. You can use them as a distributor just to get your products to your customers in New Zealand. If they spend over $49, they get free shipping. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and it comes so quickly. Amazon will make an impact here in New Zealand soon. It'll happen soon. We'll see a fulfillment centre here in New Zealand, and we'll see them start to dominate the retail landscape here. It's coming. I've been involved in Amazon now for about 6 years, Amazon in the US. My products here in New Zealand, it's likely that they will go into Amazon in Australia. And when you order here in New Zealand, I'll get them fulfilled from Australia. You'll get them delivered to your door within a matter of days. It could be 2 to 3 days, and you won't pay for shipping. So that's something that I'm going to pursue. But my experience has been with Amazon.com, which is in America. Now, the opportunity for New Zealanders selling into Amazon.com into America is that they are exposed to a much larger audience. There are hundreds of millions of people that are buying on Amazon.com every day. So we get exposure to that audience. Also, their buying behavior is different than ours. They are probably about, I would say before COVID, probably about 8 years ahead of our retail behavior in terms of buying online. And now it might be, say, 5 years, because we've suddenly caught up very quickly and gratefully over the last couple of years with the experience we've had with COVID. But still, their buying behavior is much better. So they are much more likely to buy things online and food online than we are here in New Zealand just at the moment. So by getting your products into Amazon, then you've got a much higher chance of getting your products to more customers and for them to buy it more often. Now, I guess my number one piece of advice for people is that you can't just think that you can put your product on Amazon and leave it and it's going to sell. I looked at a New Zealand product just yesterday that I was surprised it was on Amazon. They're on Amazon in America and Amazon in Australia. And I thought, good on them. There's not many Kiwi companies I see that have made the step to do that. They weren't a massive company. They were fairly big, but they were a real big company. And so I went and had a look on there, and it's obvious that their brand has been put up on Amazon. They probably paid a professional company to do it for them, and then it's been left. There's been no real promotion, no pushing it, no managing it. And there's just not enough sales for a brand like that. So if you're not prepared to invest time in it and do it properly, then I wouldn't bother, because it can take up a lot of your time and effort. But if you're willing to get really involved in it and do the best you can on Amazon, then it can be a fantastic channel to be involved in.
Great. And so what are the things involved with actually getting your product to Amazon.com?
Physically to Amazon?
Yeah. So for example, if I had a product and say I've got some coffee and it's going gangbusters in New Zealand and Australia, and I'm ready to look at the US market, I have been recommended Amazon. So what's the process like for getting it on there?
I would say it's relatively simple, but for your first time and you don't know what you're doing, it will be very complex. But there's a lot of education out there where you can learn how to do it. Amazon has a platform called, I think it's Seller University, and they have lots and lots of videos on there that explain how to go through different stages to get your product onto Amazon. And once you know how to do it, they make it really easy. Like, they're very, very good. There are some challenges involved, but you can do it. In terms of getting your product physically in there, it's pretty straightforward. You're gonna send your product from New Zealand into a fulfillment warehouse in America, and then they send your product out to your customers. So you don't have to worry about anything apart from getting it into that warehouse, and that's taken care of for you to get your product to the customer.
And obviously there are, working as a designer who've sent products into the US, there are quite a number of regulations and things that need to meet a US product market, isn't there? Because I know that when we designed Fuller, the Oats, we did it for a US packaging. And then their nutrition, if anyone out there has ever looked on the back of a pack that's come from the US, you'll notice that their nutritional information is much, much different to ours. And so you started full of based off the US, but you're finding. In fact, I've had people ask me where, oh, can you get it in New Zealand because it looks really good. And so you're exploring bringing all of that to New Zealand now. So have you had quite a lot of people in New Zealand ask, for this product, and has that been the catalyst for wanting to source the ingredients and do it here?
When I first launched, I had a number of followers in New Zealand, and so I had a very good response from New Zealand buyers, even though they had to buy the product in US dollars and pay for shipping, which was really expensive. Then I had a humbling amount of success from New Zealanders that followed me through the journey, which I explained before, by using social media. I always knew that there was going to be some interest here in New Zealand, and it was a 50-50 call from the beginning whether I should produce here in New Zealand or go to the US. And I actually had a chat to Roman from Fix and Fog about that, because he exports to the US and they started here in New Zealand. I was looking at doing things differently, starting in the US and then coming here to New Zealand. And the advice was that because I had already had experience in selling on Amazon, that was a platform that I knew. I was best to continue on with that and launch into the US. And so that's what I did. And I'm glad I did. Like, it's still been really hard work, and it's very complex and difficult to try and create a food product like this from New Zealand, having to call lots of different ingredient suppliers and manufacturers in the US to go through the process to actually finally get to production. That was really challenging. I did it, and I launched in the US on Shopify, and then I launched again on Amazon. And the reason why I'm now coming home to New Zealand, two reasons. One, I always wanted to do it here in New Zealand. I know I'm going to get a good following here in New Zealand. I've got backing from a supermarket, so that's a real key driver for me, that there's backing from foodstuffs. For me to put my product on their shelves, then I ideally want to produce it here in New Zealand, for that to happen. And then secondly, there's three reasons. Secondly, I can do it much more efficiently here in New Zealand. I can go and visit my suppliers, I can get much better pricing, and I can have much more control over that process of production here in New Zealand and do it far more cost efficiently than I can in the US. And I can ship my products to the US after being manufactured here in New Zealand. And then thirdly, it's actually been much more fun for me to make the products here, to go and meet my suppliers, to talk to them, to pick up the phone and call them. And it's been a real interesting experience for me to contrast doing that in the US compared to doing it in New Zealand. And this contrast allowed me to understand our culture a little bit more and understand, how different we are. And it was one that's much more fun, much more friendly, much more reasonable, and much more open to dealing with small players like myself. When I tried to do this in the US, it was difficult to be a small supplier like myself who hasn't done it before, for these companies to accept me and give me a small MOQ to go ahead and order their products or get into production.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it does show the difference in markets. And do you think that they're, like you mentioned, that from a supplier perspective, it's more, I guess, more friendly and more localized in New Zealand. But do you think the customer base is a difference? Would you say there's fundamental difference between the customers you have in New Zealand compared with the US?
Yeah, and I guess that's another reason why I didn't want to launch here in New Zealand. I don't want to be just solely an online brand in New Zealand. Like I said, I think we're probably at least 5 years behind the e-commerce readiness to buy food online here in New Zealand, whereas in the US that's not the case. So if I want to be an online business, primarily an online business like I do, then the US is the best place for me right now. If I want to sell here in New Zealand, then I want to be on supermarket shelves. That's the key driver for these types of brands here in New Zealand, is to be on a supermarket shelf. We don't have the scale of people or the culture to be buying enough of these products online to make it a successful business for me just yet. So I've got to be on a supermarket shelf. And so with the support from foodstuffs for that to happen, then that was a real key driver for me to come here to New Zealand. Like you said, because it's about the culture of the buyer, that they were more likely to buy in the supermarket, initially to discover the product anyway. And then hopefully after that, I can then pull them across and they can buy online.
Awesome. And you mentioned foodstuffs, and I know that I've been, watching, and we've had our chats about
Yeah.
foodstuffs and all that. So what was it like going and presenting to foodstuffs for the first time?
Well, yeah, once again, doing it in New Zealand, it was low key, it was very friendly, it was very chill and relaxed. Um, such a, I think, just such a welcoming experience. Uh, it wasn't like I had expected. It was very like all the other companies I've dealt with here in New Zealand, uh, all very friendly and relaxed. You know, for me to do that in the US, completely different story. A lot more hoops you've got to jump through, a lot more formalities. I walk into foodstuffs. I don't have to. It's not like I've got to sign anything or sign myself in, or I have a chat with the receptionist. I gave her some oats. She's really friendly. She asked me, how I've got there, what I've been doing for the day, what I would like a cup of coffee. And then when I go to the meeting to present to these guys, again, all very relaxed and chilled. And it's such a nice contrast compared to doing this in the US.
Yeah, that's really, and it's really good that you say that, because I think there's a lot of stigma around the duopoly and the fact that these are big, scary supermarket people in New Zealand, when their really reality is, and it is a huge, huge theme that comes through. Anyone that I've spoken to on these has said to me that they were absolutely terrified of going and speaking and presenting to supermarkets, but they have come out of the meetings and gone, actually, they're all just normal people. There's no monsters in there. It's just because, I think it generally is because, we have really two massive players. There's more players coming out now. And so, like you say, that change is happening with the online market with people like Soupy, for example. And so that there is a lot of change happening. But our e-commerce market, and most people would probably say, when you say, our e-commerce market is not very big in New Zealand, would say, oh no, it's massive. But it's different, right, to the US. And like you say, people will in the US couldn't spend their entire shop online. It's not something in New Zealand that we're used to. What are the things that you think need to change for us to get to that point in the US from an online shopping perspective?
I think shipping is the most important thing. And it's probably something that we've neglected up until this point. When you look at Amazon, they've always started out with a vision that they want to get the product to you as quickly as possible. And so, as a retail store, a physical retail store, that's the one thing that they have over e-commerce is speed. If you want something, you can go on there and get it immediately. But when it comes to buying online, you've got to be patient and wait. And Amazon have always focused on speed. It was a few years ago, already now that we've heard about, they wanted to start delivering their products by drone, so that when you ordered, you're going to get it maybe even that morning, or at least that same day. And so with this, I've got this overarching goal that they're working towards. Everything is all about speed. So they have a number of fulfillment centers all around the US. And so when I send my products over there, they will distribute these products to these different fulfillment centers. They'll then monitor the buying behavior of the customer. So which regions are most likely to buy these types of products? And then they'll send my product over towards that warehouse, so that when those people buy it, they're in that region, they'll get it faster. And so they're very, very focused on customer first. It's not so much profit first. People might give them a hard time for being this big company and all that money, but they're very, very focused on customer first. And they will do anything in their power to make sure they can get this product to their customer fast and cheap. And some of the shipping options they have available, it's just amazing how quickly and how cheaply they can get these products to the customer. So here in New Zealand, that is the biggest hurdle. Our shipping is expensive, it's slow, it's unreliable, and it's a pain in the ass. This is embarrassing for New Zealand Post, but I sent my samples to foodstuffs from the domestic airport. I was flying down to Christchurch, I think it was, and I thought, foodstuffs is on the way. I'm taking an Uber to the airport. I could just drop in there and I'll drop the samples off on the way. And I thought, nah, bugger it. I'm not going to muck around with that. I'll go straight to the airport. I can see there's a New Zealand Post shop there, and I'll just put them in the post, and then, it's taken care of. That was on something like the first of the month, right at the beginning of the month. I had a meeting with Foodstuffs 3 weeks later. I got there before my bloody samples did. That was embarrassing. Like, I'm a business. I'm sending my products to Foodstuffs because I want them to sample them before I get there. 3 weeks later, where I posted them from to Foodstuffs was only, I think, 500 meters away. It took 3 weeks to get there. And it's just, how can you build an e-commerce business when you can't rely on our post when it's like that? Reliability, expense, and speed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Especially for me, like I send a lot of stuff around the country and get samples from people and things like that. And so I would agree with you that is one of the fundamental problems that we have and with e-commerce in New Zealand. So with the journey you had with Fuller, what have been the key learnings that you've had along the way with starting this product business? I mean, we've talked about the fact that you've had a couple of businesses, but this is the first real exposure and getting into branding and the food product business. So what are some of the key learnings that you feel you'd like to share?
Yeah, right. I've had other businesses and I've had other brands that have been e-commerce focused brands. And when I came into this one, then I thought that I had a decent amount of experience and I knew what to do. And my biggest learning is, I'm humble, but my biggest learning was to continue to be humble and just to learn as much as I could. And I don't think that's a new thing. I think I'm pretty good at that, and I don't mind asking questions. I don't mind asking silly questions, and I don't mind asking people for their help and advice, and then I'll take their advice. And so one thing that I did when I first started this was I made a commitment to myself that when I had decisions to make, that I would do the opposite to what I thought was the right thing to do. And the reason behind that was that I wanted to end up in a different place than where I'd ended up previously. And so if I continued to use the same mindset that I'd used previously, I'd end up in the same place. So I thought, right, I don't want that. I want to end up in a much better place than where I have ended up previously with the brands that I've had. So I'll just do the opposite. It wasn't always successful, and it certainly wasn't efficient sometimes in terms of the money that I spent, but I've ended up in a much better place in terms of where my brand is going. For example, like taking you on board is a perfect example. I would not have done that. And at that time, I said to myself, right, in the past, what would you have done? No, I wouldn't have gone with Laura. I would have gone onto Fiverr, I would have gone to Upwork, and I would have found someone just like I'd done previously, and I would have got a decent job done. So I was like, right, you're not going to do that. You're going to do the opposite. It's going to cost you a lot more money, but we're not taking the same path as before. And so I had this commitment that I would just choose a new path, not knowing where it would go, not knowing how much it would cost me, but I would learn along the way. And at the end of that, I would become someone different because of the route that I'd taken was different. And I would learn a lot more. And so I would be in a much better place to make better decisions from because my mind had been open. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned along this way, Laura.
Oh, that's awesome. Look, Dane, thank you so much for joining us on this chat this afternoon. I really appreciate it, and I'm really, really enjoying your journey. I'm going to pop a link to your social media on this video because for anyone that's starting out a product business and you want to hear all about the pains and the wins, and Dane's journey has been a really awesome one, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you so much for bringing me on your journey.
Thank you very much, Laura. You've been a really, really important part of it, and I could not have got to the stage without you. So thanks so much.
You're most welcome.